Hey guys, Megaton Menace here, back with another video. So this is my blind reaction and review to Evangelion 3.0 plus 1.01, Thrice Upon a Time. So, this actual YouTube video is just going to be the review. I'm going to start off without spoilers and then transition into spoilers. If you are here for the reaction, link is in the description of this video, because can't put that shit right on YouTube because it'll get copyright taken down. Also, this review is unscripted, and therefore, if I come across a little rambly, sorry. And if I go out of order, sorry. And if I end up doing non-spoiler and then spoiler and then going back to spoiler, I'm sorry, that might happen. So, first of all, and as things are right now, it is Saturday the 14th, and I've seen the film all the way through a grand total of 3 times. So, where I'm at right now is, I did thoroughly enjoy this film. Definitely would say that I loved it, and that I feel like that this film works both as a conclusion for the rebuild of Evangelion series, but it would also work fine as a conclusion to the entire Evangelion franchise. Meaning, from a narrative standpoint, if another Evangelion-related anime is never made, that would be okay. Now, I don't think that's going to happen, because the Evangelion franchise makes enough money that some corporate person somewhere is going to want some sort of new Evangelion anime to come out. And for that reason, I feel like that the franchise could easily sleep for a decade, but I don't think it's going to be done forever or anything, just for, corporate money reasons. Now, I guess we'll just start with, vague things. With opinions that are, So, I do feel like that Shinji, Rei, Asuka, Masato, Mari, and Gendo all get conclusive character arcs that are satisfying. However, I also feel like that with both Rei and Mari, barely. Both of their character arcs are they're the two where their character arcs are the least conclusive and the least satisfying. However, everyone else I just listed off, definitely on point with the conclusion. Also, let's see. Then when it comes to things like music and fight scenes, I feel like that the soundtrack for this movie is good, and that Shiro Sagasu did do a good job with that. But I also feel like that the amount of songs in this movie where you're like, damn, that's a bop, and the quality of the best songs in this movie are not quite on par with the other 3. I do think that while this movie's soundtrack is good, I think 1.11, 2.22, and 3.33 all have better soundtracks. However, that's really hard, because 3.33 is my personal least favorite Rebuild of Evangelion movie, but of the 4 films, 3.33 does have the best soundtrack. So, and then also fight scenes. I feel, so when it comes to fight scenes, in the first 2 films, the fight scenes are basically about the same quality as, in the show and in End of Eva, but just, with a higher budget and more polish, and they're sexier. But in 3 and 4, there's a lot of moments where the action scenes are a little bit too fast for you to keep up with, or the camera's a little bit too zoomed in so it's hard to tell what's happening, or we're like, you have a red good guy fighting a red bad guy on a red ground with a red environment. Like, and for that, I feel like that the action, I would say, it was definitely better than the action of the third film, but not as good as the action in 1 and 2. However, that being said, I feel like that, because in the first film, Ramiel is the standout fight, and in the second, Zeruel is the standout fight. Now, in the third film, really? The third film doesn't have a standout fight. Like, really, every fight in that movie sucks. So, I don't know. However, this film does have one fight that stands out above the others, and that is, in my opinion, the best fight in this film is the fight between Unit 1 and Unit 13. And I'm okay with mentioning that in, before we go into deep spoilers, because, it's shown in the trailers, like, we knew that fight was happening. We didn't know who the pilots were or the circumstances of it, but we knew it was happening. Then I think that's all I got when it comes to non-spoilers. So let's dive into the spoiler part. Okay, so when it comes to spoilers, a couple things. First of all, in this film, Rey, Asuka, and Masato all get killed. Now, all of these characters die in End of Evangelion as well, so I was actually kind of expecting it. So, and therefore, it's one of those things where, like, it was seeing them all die again. It was a little bit disappointing, and it did emotionally hurt, but it wasn't a surprise just because, yeah, and of course it is also very much so the type of thing where, just like in End of Evangelion, there is movie after their deaths. Then also, I also am satisfied. They do with the fact that Mari was just, a researcher alongside Gendo and Yui, and that she de-aged and stayed young because she became an Eva pilot, because I feel like that not only does that make sense, but that's better than doing something like in End of Evangelion, Asuka was pregnant and time was rewound, but Mari survived the time rewound. Like, it's like I do feel like that even though the explanation for Mari is nothing groundbreaking, I think it's better than than most of the theories that people had about what was up with Mari. Also, when it comes to the ending where Shinji uses his wish from the spear to create a world with no Evangelions, I think that makes sense, because since the situation was Shinji was an Eva pilot and everyone was miserable, then he rewound time to try to make everyone happy, but everyone was still miserable because they were Eva pilots. It makes sense to me that Shinji would realize, if I rewind time again, we're still going to be miserable because we'll still be Eva pilots. And therefore, using his wish to just create a world where there's no need for Evangelions, I think that's a clean ending, and that makes sense. Also, on that note, something that I noticed is that in the scenes of all of the Evangelions getting erased, they show every single Evangelion from the entire franchise get erased and deleted, except for Evangelion Unit 4, which means technically there is an Evangelion that was not erased that is still out there somewhere. And I don't know if that's just a creative oversight or if that was done intentionally so that if they wanted to, like, make a Evangelion 5.0, they could. I don't know. But it's still interesting to think about regardless. And, that's also another thing. Shinji and Mari ending up together at the end feels weird, partially because Mari throughout the Rebuild films receives very little character development, and also because of the fact that, like, she's a new character, because Mari has only existed since 2.0 came out in 2009, 12 years ago, and therefore making Mari the priority does feel a little weird. However, when it comes to the Evangelion franchise, okay, so I have not read the Shinji Ikari Raising Project manga. Well, I read like 75% of it. And I have not played the game, the Girlfriend of Steel visual novel. But every other anime and manga and game in the Evangelion franchise that I am aware of, I have played. And every single one of them has an ending that is either open-ended and ambiguous or puts Shinji with Asuka. And therefore, even though I'm not really that much of a fan of Shinji Mari, because I can get behind it just because it's an ending we've never seen before. Like, it's not Asuka, and it's not like Forever Alone or The Power of Friendship, and therefore, even though I don't love it, I don't hate it. Also, I didn't directly say it earlier, but I implied it, but this movie does indeed straight up tell us that sequel theory is true. And just to be clear, loop theory is not true, but sequel theory is true. These two theories are very similar, but different. Because loop theory is that End of Evangelion leads into 1.11, and then 4.0 leads into Neon Genesis Evangelion Episode 1. That is loop theory. And that's not the case. However, sequel theory, which is that End of Evangelion leads into 1.11, and then 4.0 leads into the beginning of a third timeline, that is the case. That is true. So everyone that predicted sequel theory was right. And it's one of those things where, like, sequel theory as a concept is fine, but it is a little lame that it's like, yep, the theory that half the fandom predicted for the last 15 years is exactly what we got. But it's not a huge deal. And it is also true that loop theory, if it was true, could undermine the events of the series. However, sequel theory doesn't. So it doesn't, because if it undid or changed the original series, I'd have a problem with it, but it doesn't, so I don't. And the point of this is that what this means is that all of the quantum rays that we see throughout Rebuild are technically from Lilith in End of Evangelion, just like the quantum rays that are in the original series, because the quantum rays don't give a fuck about time, so they go forward and backwards in the timeline. Also, during the final act, when they open the door of Guff, they summon something called the Ava Imaginary. And they explain it as being an imaginary Evangelion that exists outside of their reality, that is simultaneously fictitious and real. And when it gets summoned into the real world, it looks just like the End of Evangelion version of Lilith. Now, whether or not this is... Because since the Door of Guff exists outside of... Well, what is behind the Door of Guff exists outside of reality, it's easy for me to believe that something could go from behind the door into reality in the same way in multiple realities. And that, therefore, it's definitely open to interpretation, but I do believe that that Ava imaginary is Lilith from End of Evangelion being resurrected by the Door of Guff for the purpose of initiating Final Impact. And I think that's basically it. So thank you again for watching this review. Also, just a reminder that for the full 2-hour and 45-minute reaction, that is posted on Google Drive in a link in the description. And I hope you enjoyed this review, and hopefully people will actually, watch and enjoy the reaction as well. And until next time, peace.